Hey folks, this is Frankly Vegas, where we eat as you'd eat. We experience places anonymously so that we can report about them honestly. And today we're taking you to the newly opened location of Chubby Cattle, serving up what appears to be Japanese-style barbecue. Chubby Cattle already has an existing location in the Las Vegas area, serving up hot pot, backed by a founder and team with more than 8 years of experience under their belt with similar concepts. But the day we went to their location for Japanese barbecue, or yakiniku, was during their soft opening phase. The moment you walk in, there's some interesting signs about membership and store policies, which we'll discuss later on. Tonight, we ordered the Diamond tier, which allows each person at our table of 4 to order 2 items from each special section. We'll talk more about our thoughts about the menu tiers later. For now, let's jump into the food. We'll start off with the special items in the Diamond tier, which are only available in limited quantities. So, first up are a couple of types of scallop sashimi that we got. One of them is a scallop sashimi with uni, and the other is scallop sashimi with caviar. The scallop sashimi with uni is quite delicious. The scallop itself is very tender and silky smooth. It's subtly sweet, very mellow in flavor that we would usually expect from fresh scallop. In the middle of a bite is where you start getting a hit of the uni, or sea urchin, that's stuffed into the middle of the scallop. Although it's hard to distinguish the texture of the uni from the scallop because both items are just so tender, especially with the extremely fresh scallop, we do get a slight hint of the briny nuttiness coming from the uni. And you finish off with the sweetness of the fresh scallop again. This is a high-quality scallop sashimi that's extremely fresh, with a nice, fresh piece of uni tucked into it. So far, this is a great start to our experience here at Chubby Cattle BBQ in Las Vegas. Next up, let's start jumping into the items that drew us to Chubby Cattle BBQ in the first place. And that's their beef Wagyu. The first piece we're going to try is Chubby Cattle's raw Wagyu uni caviar nigiri. This looks so beautiful and promising, so inviting. When we first bite into it, we detect some sweetness, which might be the possible ponzu sauce, brushed on the thin slice of Wagyu beef. It's also very well marbled, which presents an incredibly tender texture, making the beef so soft that it nearly melts in your mouth. You then get hit with a pleasant, although potent beefy flavor, followed by a mellow tangy sweetness of the nigiri rice underneath the beef. Although we enjoy the beefy flavor, it's potent enough that we're unable to taste much of the uni or caviar, unfortunately. I think I'd enjoy this nigiri much more if we're able to taste some earthy and briny hits coming from the uni or caviar. The rice is nicely seasoned as sushi rice. There's a little bit of tinginess that we expect that's coming from mirin. The rice kernels have a nice chew and aren't gummy, which is great. Since it's difficult to taste the uni and the caviar separately from the beef, we think that the uni and caviar don't really serve much of a purpose, other than being visual garnishes, unfortunately. And you could just have the Wagyu nigiri instead, which is a different item that you can order a lot more of available to you without any quantity restrictions that special items in upgraded tiers have. Now, we're going to up the ante by having our very first A5 Wagyu item, the A5 top blade. Wagyu is graded from 1 to 5, with A5 being the highest grade of Wagyu possible. And although there are finer details and nuances to this, we'll leave the explanation at that just to keep things more straightforward today. The A5 top blade beef is incredibly tender, and we're extremely happy with it. It presents a potent, beefy flavor. It's extremely well marbled, but not in a way where it's too fatty that it feels too greasy for your palate to handle. The A5 top blade definitely matches our expectations for A5 grade Wagyu beef. And just when you thought A5 Wagyu is peak Wagyu and couldn't get any better, there's the A5 Miyazaki Wagyu short rib. Since this particular piece of beef is called the A5 Miyazaki Wagyu short rib, we weren't expecting the usual cut of Wagyu beef, or even an A5 grade Wagyu beef for that matter. In fact, we were expecting something elevated even beyond that, if that's even possible, by tasting A5 Wagyu beef that originates from Miyazaki in Japan, a region that has won the top prize 3 consecutive times recently in Japan's National Competitive Exhibition of Wagyu that's held every 5 years. Back to Chubby Cattle's A5 Miyazaki Wagyu short rib. So, it's quite nice. It's nicely seasoned, salted, and you can definitely see specks of black pepper on it. By dipping the A5 Miyazaki Wagyu short rib into the ponzu sauce, the acidity of the ponzu sauce plays off the richness of the A5 Miyazaki Wagyu short rib. The cut's not that thick. It's on the thin side, but the texture is where we're a bit torn about the particular pieces we had today. The A5 Miyazaki Wagyu short rib that we had at Chubby Cattle BBQ provided a very rich, yet mellow, buttery flavor, enriched by the salt and pepper seasoning on it. However, the texture wasn't as tender as we'd expected, being slightly more chewy than we'd like it to be. The texture wasn't close to being melt in your mouth for A5 Wagyu, let alone matching Miyazaki Gyu that we've previously had. So, if this Wagyu short rib is supposed to be A5 Miyazaki, we can't say we're huge fans of this cut of beef from Chubby Cattle BBQ. Next up, the T-bone steak. It's interesting how Chubby Cattle BBQ has grouped the T-bone steak as a special meat that's only provided in the higher tiers on the menu, given that there's no mention of the phrases Wagyu or A5 Wagyu for the T-bone steak. It's simply called T-bone steak on the menu. When biting into the T-bone steak, it had a nice crisp on the outside, thanks to a slight char from how we grilled it. The T-bone steak is not as tender as the Wagyu cuts as we've already had, so it has a bit more of a chew biting into it. Also, the flavor isn't as beefy or fatty as well, so those flavors are not as prominent. Our last bite of the T-bone steak is a little bit on the dry, lean side. By dipping it into the ponzu sauce, it helps add some flair to the flavor, providing a tangy character. Dipping it into the salt does in fact help bring out more of the beefy flavor. This particular piece of T-bone steak isn't too bad given it isn't Wagyu. Here we're trying another piece of T-bone steak, this time with large chunks of fat in it, with hopes that maybe it'll be more tender than the last piece we ate. It turns out this piece was actually tougher and more chewy than the previous piece. Also, there was much less flavor in this piece as well, almost to the point of being bland. This piece didn't produce much beefy flavor, and it's as if the kitchen missed seasoning this piece. So dipping it into the salt and ponzu sauce helped elevate flavor that was missing. We really wanted the T-bone steak to end on a high note, since it's found in the special meat section for the premium tiers, but unfortunately, it didn't taste so special to us. Getting back into A5 Wagyu cuts, now we're going to try some A5 finger meat. The servers, in our case, helped us grill quite a few of our meats. For the A5 finger meat, they grilled it a couple of ways. One way was to grill both sides, and another way was to grill just one side only. When you bite into the A5 finger meat, it provides an amazing mouth feel. The A5 finger meat tastes like a balanced piece of Wagyu. It's very nicely marbled, but it also has a leaner texture, where you can experience some of the connective tissue within beef. This is nice for folks who would love to experience Wagyu, but may find certain cuts of Wagyu to be too rich. Check out how amazing this piece of A5 finger meat looks. The scallions provide a small pop of zesty brightness when you eat such a rich piece of beef. The A5 finger meat we've tried is nicely charred where it contacted the grill, providing slightly crispy texture and a slight smoky hit to the beef as you're eating it. If you eat a piece that's grilled on just one side, with the grilled side on the bottom, your tongue first gets hit with a slight mired nuttiness from the grilled beef flavor, finishing off with more silky, smoother, and more raw portions of the piece you're eating. So, that's our take on the special meats and special dishes that we tried with our Diamond Tier menu at Chubby Cattle BBQ in Las Vegas. But that's not all. Don't go anywhere, and we'll be right back with much more food to go through. Let's take a break from the beef for a little bit, change things up, and first try some of the salmon carpaccio. So, the salmon carpaccio is decent. Eating it gives you a tender sensation, where you'll also get the pop from the fresh wasabi, as well as a slight hit of truffle oil. Plus, a little bit of that bright tanginess of the ponzu sauce, combined with a muted salmon flavor. You get some freshness from the microgreens sitting on top. The raw salmon is on the fresh side. I don't think it's the freshest, most supple piece of raw salmon I've had, but it's not bad. Let's move on to the Argentina red shrimp. These are very large, substantial pieces of shrimp. These ain't no shrimpy shrimp. Chubby Cattle did a good job of cutting off the antennas and coating a decent amount of chopped garlic bits on the outside of the shrimp. Our server suggested a 3-minute grill time, which we followed to the T. Once the shrimp is ready to eat, you can see that the shell separates very easily from the meat, indicating the freshness of the shrimp. The meat inside has a sweet flavor that's quite succulent, providing some firmness in texture. And if you're into tasting, sucking, or eating shrimp shells, you're in for a treat here. Grilled appropriately, the shell has an edible crunch to it, and you're rewarded with the flavors infused by the garlic bits, along with the salted seasoning on the outside of the shrimp. We really enjoyed eating the Argentina red shrimp here. Now, let's try some more scallops, where the difference between these scallops and the scallop sashimi earlier is that the scallops seen here need to be grilled. These scallops are topped with some chopped scallions and drizzled with Chubby Cattle's own take on yakiniku sauce. This piece of scallop wasn't attached too tightly to the shell, so we're able to lift it up and remove it quite easily. It turns out the scallop is generally quite tender. There's a thin outer layer that's nice and chewy in texture, providing a little bit of a savory hit that goes well with the inner tender parts of the scallop that's more mellow and sublime in flavor. Then you have the flavor of the yakiniku sauce that's now stickier and caramelized after the grilling, infusing some more umami, savoriness, and some tanginess from the ponzu component of the yakiniku sauce. All of these flavors and textures play very nicely together. These scallops are enjoyable to eat. Now, let's try the steamed egg where we see some bonito flakes, a piece of cooked shrimp, and some scallions, all sitting on top of the steamed egg. The bowl helps maintain the warmth of the egg, that by now isn't too hot to the touch after sitting around for a while. The steamed egg has a nice texture, similar to a firmer version of custard. It's not the creamiest steamed egg we've had, and its texture is typical of what you find in other Asian all-you-can-eat places, or even Korean barbecue places. Not that we're docking points for this. When eating a spoonful of steamed egg, the flavor is slightly eggy, with the scallions adding an occasional brightness, while the bonito flakes add a slight umami to it, which works well with the scallions. The thing about the bonito flakes is that they are on the tougher side, as opposed to typically being rather delicate, where they more or less dissolve in your mouth. Were the bonito flakes shaved a tad too thickly when they were made? We're not quite sure, but overall, this is a decent Asian-style steamed egg. Alright, moving on to these large slices of king oyster mushrooms. They looked promising and fresh, and appeared to have some seasoning on them. When we ate them, they had a nice, firm, bouncy chew, but the flavor caught us a bit off guard, tasting a bit like plastic. Now, I'm not sure if what we saw was in fact seasoning on these slices of king oyster mushroom, because we didn't really taste anything other than the plastic flavor. This is not the best king oyster mushroom we've had. Now that we've tried quite a few of the other dishes at Chubby Cattle BBQ in Las Vegas, let's go in on some more beef items next. Don't go anywhere, and we'll be right back with more A5 and Wagyu items. And welcome back as we resume our feast of beef here at Chubby Cattle BBQ in Las Vegas. We're going to first try another A5 Wagyu item, the A5 brisket. This particular brisket looks so well marbled, where the marbling has the signature pink hue seen in high-grade Wagyu. The leaner parts have a nice rich red color too. This is looking so promising. One of our Korean friends at the table wanted to try grilling the brisket K-barbecue style by grabbing clumps of meat and then banging it and swishing it against the grill. This technique is believed to keep the brisket moist and prevent it from drying out, especially with the usual leaner cuts of brisket found in other K-barbecue places. Some parts of the brisket ended up getting a little charred. However, the rest of it looks quite nice. And it's actually surprising how succulent it is for brisket, thanks to the marbling and the A5 grade of the beef. It doesn't taste too lean or dried out. A lot of times, when grilling the run-of-the-mill brisket at Asian barbecue places, it can get too lean and dry. The beefy flavor is nicely balanced as well. This is easily one of the best Asian barbecue briskets I've ever had. Next, let's try some of the items on the beef tongue platter. The platter includes some thin slices, as well as some small cubes of beef tongue. Let's first try the slices from the beef tongue platter. You taste that natural tanginess that's a signature of beef tongue. Then as you chew, you can feel the bounce in the texture that's also characteristic of beef tongue. The scallions once again give a slight brightness to the overall satiating experience of the delicious beef tongue. So far so good. Moving on to the cubes of beef tongue. Not only do you experience more of the bounce and give in the texture as you chew through the thicker portions of the cubes, but you also get a stronger hit of the beefiness from the tongue that plays nicely with the undertone of the usual tangy note. The beef tongue platter is a great choice here. Now, there are a handful of Wagyu items that can be ordered by anybody, regardless of the menu tier you're paying for, which also means Chubby Cattle does not impose additional quantity limits on them, and one of them is the Wagyu nigiri. It seems like a great thing to be able to order as much Wagyu nigiri as you're allowed to. However, with the Wagyu nigiri, the beef is sliced so thin that we had a tough time perceiving any Wagyu characteristics in it. Thinking back, maybe one way to achieve the Wagyu experience from Wagyu nigiri is to stack multiple slices of the Wagyu beef on top of each other, so that you make your own thicker layer of Wagyu beef. The rice is nicely seasoned as sushi rice. There's a little bit of tanginess from the mirin infused in the rice. The rice kernels have a nice chew that's not gummy or too dry. Because of the lack of Wagyu characteristics in the Wagyu nigiri, this isn't a top favorite choice for us. It's just okay. The next Wagyu item we tried is the Wagyu tartar. Now, a typical recipe for beef tartar usually calls for using tenderloin. So, substituting tenderloin for Wagyu definitely gives the beef tartar here at Chubby Cattle a leg up. All of the elements work so well together with the Wagyu tartar, starting with the beef on its own furs. The beef is quite delicious. It's moist, thick, and you get a hit of the marinade that tastes like a blend of soy sauce, ponzu sauce, and sesame oil, giving the beef savory, tangy, and nutty notes. And at the same time, you also get a little bit of a spicy kick provided by some chili seeds that you can see. And as if there isn't enough umami and nuttiness already, there's some specks of Japanese furikake blended seasoning with its seaweed bits, some paprika, and both roasted and raw sesame seeds. Meanwhile, the chips that accompany the Wagyu tartar taste like regular potato Pringles. providing a crisp that turns into a firm, slightly moist crumble upon contact with moisture, which balances nicely with the indulgent, moist, savory texture of the beef to result in an incredible experience in your mouth. We really enjoyed the Wagyu tartare. Next up is the chopped rib eye, which is presented in a plate with a small built-in dip that contains what we're told is Chubby Cattle's spin on yakiniku sauce, with raw pasteurized egg mixed into it. And once again, the chopped rib eye is a very nicely marbled piece of meat. It's very rich and fatty, and even the parts that are slightly charred produce a nice, fatty crisp that's very enjoyable to eat, providing a nice contrast with all the velvety marbling of the rib eye. And when we tried dipping the chopped rib eye into the sauce it came with, we didn't feel the sauce added much, since the chopped ribeye already had an oily and silky texture outside of it. Adding essentially a mellow flavored egg wash is a wash. Next, we're having the full-blood Wagyu ribeye steak. Our server explained to us that the term full-blood means that 95 to 97% of the cattle's DNA is Wagyu. However, when you look up Wagyu resources, full-blood means that 100% of the cattle's DNA must be Wagyu. There's another industry term for beef that falls short of 100% Wagyu. So we're not sure if we had actual full-blood Wagyu beef at Chubby Cattle, or if it's close to 100% but not exactly full-blood. Anyhow, it's no surprise by now that this is another cut of beef that's extremely well marbled too. The texture of the full-blood Wagyu ribeye steak is actually more lean and chewy than I expected, wherever it made contact with the grill, but the interior is rather tender. Even then, you're definitely not getting that melt in your mouth feeling that you'd expect from a more pure grade of Wagyu. It doesn't taste too beefy or too fatty either. It certainly could use some salt to help amplify the beefy flavor. Otherwise, there's a slight bit of a tangy flavor coming from the beef. Given how the server got our hopes up, we couldn't help but feel a bit let down by the full-blood Wagyu ribeye steak. Here's another piece of beef that is considered full-blood, the full-blood Wagyu knuckle. You first get hit with an even beefier flavor than what we tasted in the full-blood Wagyu ribeye steak. There's a bit of a tangy and even an earthy flavor to it. It's relatively tender, but once again, it's not to the point where it melts in your mouth either. An interesting thing midway through the bite and as you finish is that the earthy flavor gets more potent over time, to the point that it tastes like there's a note of beef liver in it. Now, oddly enough, this was a delightful surprise for us, since we're fans of that earthy, grungy organ flavor, but it's very easy to see how many others may find this to be offensive to their palate. Okay, that was a good amount of beef that we've tried. We still have some last few items that we have coming up. We'll be right back with our take on them. All right. Let's kick off the last few items we have, starting with what we think is pork belly. Pork belly is available with the lowest silver tier, but we actually ordered the Iberico pork instead. This particular piece of pork belly looks nicely marbled and has large chunks of fat on the ends of it. It's well seasoned and peppered, giving it a slight yet nice amount of salinity. After grilling it, the meat and the fat are on the firmer side as far as texture goes, even though it wasn't on the grill too long. Not the best pork belly we've had, but not the worst. But it certainly is a far cry from the Iberico pork, which is the pork equivalent of Wagyu beef in texture, if that's what we were actually served. Next up is the spinach, a perfectly timed blanche, so that there's an enjoyable crisp to the stalks of the spinach. Some sesame seeds have been sprinkled onto the spinach, and there's some bonito flakes, which added a nice touch of umami to the spinach. There's a nutty flavor coming from what tastes like sesame oil. Unfortunately, the spinach was very salty overall, so it's a good thing that it came in a small serving. Moving on, here's some steamed rice, with some furikake sprinkled in to give it a little bit of salinity and umami. However, the rice was a bit overdone and tasted a little gummy to us. Onto some truffle fries, which looks like they have a light dusting of truffle salt and some black pepper. They may have been a bit too generous with salt though, so it's actually very salty. The fry job seemed off where the outside crust is on the thick and crunchy side, with a bit too much oil, as opposed to being intentionally starched up. Also, the inside of the fries is not pillowy, leading to a bit of a starchy texture. It's also on the stale side, and mostly lacks that fresh potato flavor. I would say this is not my favorite fry. Chubby Cattle provides drink dispensers that include unlimited coffee, milk teas, juices, some Coca-Cola products, and Dr. Pepper. And finally, I walked out with some of their mango lemonade slush from machines near the front door of Chubby Cattle BBQ, which had more potent mango flavor than it did lemonade. In fact, it was hard to detect any citrus or lemonade flavor in it. Still though, it's quite sweet, and is a nice, refreshing way to end the meal after eating quite a bit of meat, with plenty of fat and marbling in them. And so that's our take on the food we had at Chubby Cattle BBQ in Las Vegas. Our favorite items at Chubby Cattle BBQ are the A5 brisket and the beef tongue platter, as well as the Wagyu tartare, which was quite fun to eat. For the special items in the more premium tiers on the menu, they seemed like a hit or miss to us. Our top choices there are the scallop sashimi, A5 top blade, and A5 finger meat. Based on our experience, unless you really want the scallop sashimi, the A5 brisket, and the beef tongue platter, we think you can save yourself the extra $20 and stick with the lowest tier, the silver tier. The options available under the diamond tier are identical to the gold tier, except that you're able to pick more choices under each special section. Let's chat about the ambiance because we think it's worth mentioning. When you walk in, you get this cool, modern fusion of Japanese decor, dressed in dark, warm colors and hues, accented with brass fixtures and modern lighting. It's got a youthful, casual vibe. But here's the thing, the tables and seats are a bit of a mess. One side of the first table we were seated at is way too close, while the other side is too far. We even tried switching tables that had the same issue. Tables and seats seemed permanently fixed, so no luck there. Chubby Cattle BBQ bills itself as an all-you-can-eat spot, and you'll see it everywhere, from their outdoor signs to their website, where they're, quote, offering an unlimited dining experience, end quote, and even on the walls inside. Nowadays, most AYCE places in Vegas give you a 90-minute time limit, which is typical and a sign of the times. And if you go over, they'll gently remind you to wrap it up. Some resort buffets will have service drop by your table when you're anywhere from 15 to 20 minutes over the 90-minute limit to gently remind you that your time is up. But not at Chubby Cattle BBQ. Right when you walk in, there are a bunch of signs that catch your eye. One shows the 3 tiers of menu options. Another talks about membership benefits for a $28 annual fee. And a third sign talks about their store policy in detail. Membership gets you some discounts on the menu tiers. But let's dive into that store policy. Like most AYCE places, they have the usual rules about surcharges for leftovers, refusal of service, and no outside food. But get this. According to the first line of their store policy, you actually only have 70 minutes to place your orders, and they're quite strict about it. At the 70-minute mark, they'll come by your table to give you a last call notice.
It's gonna be last call for your table right now. Would you guys want me adding something on or last call?
So, about that 90-minute dining limit that you see at many all-you-can-eat buffets, somebody had to have set the precedent for that in order for many other all-you-can-eat buffets to follow suit. But Chubby Cattle's 70-minute ordering window is quite something. It might set a precedent that other places could follow. There's another twist to their ordering policy. According to the 4th bullet point from the bottom, each table can only order once every 5 minutes, with a max of 10 items per round. This might seem reasonable, but it does make you think. Even though it's hard to realistically eat more than the limits, these rules can hang over your head while dining and take away from the experience. They might be trying to control food waste, but that's already covered by a surcharge for leftovers. Or maybe it's about Chubby Cattle trying to run their business operations efficiently. So, with only 70 minutes to order, imagine trying to understand menu phrases like choose 1 from 4 per person for the gold tier, or choose 2 from 4 per person for the diamond tier. What the phrase choose 1 from 4 per person for the gold tier means is, if you're a party of 2, you can only pick 2 items from each special section, but if you're a party of 4, you get to try more. Then, there's the confusion about what to grill and what not to grill. For example, scallop sashimi from the special dishes section shouldn't be grilled, but regular scallops from the seafood section should be grilled. But when both types of scallops are on your table, and you're juggling so many things at the same time, such as managing the grilling and cooking, passing plates around, eating, struggling to savor and enjoy what you're eating, socializing, you might get confused between scallop sashimi as opposed to the other type of scallops which need grilling, which could lead to some unpleasant trips to the bathroom in the next few days if you mistakenly eat the wrong scallops raw. Also, some items on the printed menu and the digital tablet menu don't always match up, which adds to the confusion. Items like zabuton and Wagyu lean meat might be on the printed menu, but not on the tablet, and sometimes names don't match between the two. All this just eats into your 70 minutes for ordering, or the 90 minutes before you have to leave. You can pay 20% more to stay an extra 30 minutes, but figuring all this out feels like trying to understand phone plans from back in the early 2000s. And the end result was us paying $85 each to ultimately feel rushed during our experience at Chubby Cattle BBQ in Las Vegas, struggling to recall which items we liked and which could have been better as we left the restaurant. So that's our take on our overall experience at Chubby Cattle BBQ of Las Vegas. Based on the weighted average across multiple factors such as food, ambiance, and service, we give Chubby Cattle BBQ a frankly Vegas rating of 6.75 out of 10. Chubby Cattle BBQ is located only 5 minutes from the Las Vegas Strip in the Chinatown part of Las Vegas on Spring Mountain Road. If you want to make reservations, they don't provide typical options for reservations such as by phone, a simple form on their website, OpenTable, Yelp, Google Maps, or even 7 Rooms. Instead, you can only make reservations if you buy one of their NFTs. Oddly enough, the cheapest one will cost you a hefty $600. These NFTs come with some dining perks, access to their Discord channel, and the ability to make reservations. But you have to wonder, is a $600 NFT really worth it? Maybe it is for the super fans. Unfortunately, as of now, buying an NFT doesn't extend your dining time. If you liked this video, please feel free to give it a thumbs up. And don't forget to hit the subscribe button on our channel so that you won't miss any of our upcoming experiences.